Duane and I have known Ted and Margaret and the family for around 50 years now. I babysat Sam, the youngest, met David, the eldest, in church youth group, where Duane and I were newly married sponsors, Tim in Sunday school, and we couldn't help but run into the rest of you along the way. Ted was always so proud of his family and talked about you so often. In fact, I can't remember a time when we'd come and visit and he wasn't talking about the family. And we're so grateful for his model and his example in that way. Now Ted is no longer at the other end of the phone, and we miss him. Early on, before we knew Ted well, we told him that we planned to teach for a few years in apartheid South Africa. Typically forthright and unvarnished, Ted warned us that we could be lulled into subtle racist attitudes. I remember how indignant I felt at the time. But his warning rang true as we hit the realities of apartheid head on. Now we were vigilant, searching our hearts and checking our actions, and finally, sadly, parting ways with some of our colleagues over the issues there. Later, I had the incomparable privilege, as so many of you here have said, to be mentored by Ted for my PhD at Michigan State University. At the end of the first conversation with him about MSU, he concluded, "Come to MSU and study education. And then with that PhD, you will be prepared to teach in any context you wish." And by God's grace, that MSU PhD and Ted's mentoring did enable me to teach in contexts that I never dreamed possible. Eventually at Wheaton College, I taught students in the Human Needs and Global Resource Program to live overseas among the poor. I was then hired to direct the World Relief Child Survival Programs in 7 war-torn countries, countries like Cambodia, Bangladesh, and Mozambique. The curriculum we developed enabled hundreds of thousands of mothers to keep their children from dying due to preventable diseases during those extremely vulnerable first 5 years. Finally, quaking in my boots, I taught several of Ted's courses here at Trinity after his retirement. And Ted was always there, always encouraging, always challenging me at every turn. I found myself regularly thanking God for his imprint on my life and teaching. He demanded precision in our writing. He would say, if you can't write using 4-letter words, you're not much of a writer. So we did it. We used 4-letter words when we would much rather have used esoteric academic jargon. Clarity, not sophisticated rhetoric, drove his concern. Ted expected our writing to impact the broadest possible audiences and make a difference in the world. As Glenn said, Ted wanted people to get it. And that's his persistence. It pushed us to levels of performance that even would have surprised our own mothers. I never proffered an argument, but he could tear it to shreds. The next time I saw him, I would agree that his previous position had real merit, and he would proceed then to argue from my original position. Ted was the only person I knew who could genuinely dialogue with himself. Such was the power of his intellect. You all know how much he loved a good argument. His creativity had no limits. His rich use of metaphor, stories, and provocative questions are now legendary. Sometimes he used that creativity simply for effect. Like the time our 2 preschool boys met up with Ted, he described this giant, invisible duck that he kept in his basement. And the only thing that duck would eat, can you imagine it, was magazine covers. Our boys were enchanted, and they still talk about it to this day. That same creativity generated a stream of provocative questions that never failed to disturb his students' categories, producing the best kind of learning. Once I watched him start a class here at TED's by asking, "Did Jesus ever ride a bicycle?" Now he had everyone's attention. Smirking, they said, "Of course not. Bicycles weren't invented yet." Ted went on, "But schools had been invented. Why didn't Jesus start a school to teach his disciples?" Then they were off in an animated discussion about how people learn best, what triggers good learning, what mitigates against the best learning, and how Jesus, the master teacher, himself taught. Finally, I must speak to Ted's profound respect for us women students. He did not have a shred of bias against women. He made no distinctions. He had an abiding faith that we could not only complete our course of study, but make an impressive contribution in the marketplace. And to assuage any fear of failure, he was likely to shrug and reply, "Anything worth doing is worth doing poorly the first time." Ted was motivated to serve his Lord Jesus Christ with excellence. He treated his students with genuine esteem, believing that every human being bears the image of his or her Creator. God generously gifted Ted as a teacher, a communicator, and made him into a truly wise man. God then turned around and gave us, his students, that gift of Ted to help launch us into our life's work and to journey with us down that road. Until we see you again, Ted, we are going to miss you.